Hello and welcome to Chaos Unboxed. Today we're going to talk about accelerating creativity, and we have with us a panel of visual experts both from inside and outside of Chaos to discuss this great topic. So with that, Anna, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, thank you, Rod. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chaos Unboxed from me too. My name is Anna. I'm originally an architect, and I've been with Chaos for almost 8 years now. I'm part of the product management team where we're supposed to listen to our customers and make sure that their feature requests are correctly translated to our development team.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ziad Chanbour. I'm an architect. I have almost 10 years of experience in architectural visualization. Currently, I'm working at Goldbeck, a big construction and architectural firm in Germany.
Hi, my name is E Inciarte, and I am the founder and one of the co-directors of Narrativ in London. And originally a graphic designer, been doing this for far too long, nearly 21 years now. Somehow fell into architecture, did it for quite a bit of time, and then now at Narrativ we're trying to sort of blur the lines between what architectural visualization, films, and sort of media and entertainment are. Trying to be sector agnostic and I guess bring a bit of sexy back into this sector.
Hi, I'm Chris. I've been with the Enscape engineering team since I think 2018 by now, and seen the product like grow and shift through all the different phases. And by now I'm running the engineering department over here. So yeah, that's about it.
My name is Nicholas. I am the head of the 3D visualization department at CG Spectrum, where I teach students to learn how to do visualization, and I have been teaching for 12 years now, besides running my own studio as well, and yeah, just having a great time.
So Anna, I'm curious from your perspective, when you think about, say, software development or product management, and you as well, Chris, how important is it that those that are actually managing and developing the software know and incorporate those principles into the actual software itself?
Well, it's extremely important. So first of all, I really want to share how we actually communicate with our customers, because that's the starting point. So we basically strive to gather feedback from basically everyone, and then we start evaluating that feedback. And there are different criteria that we follow. Like, for example, a feature might sound cool, but then we need to see how many people actually want that feature. And then we need to see if we can actually create that feature, right? And how long will it take, how much effort will it take, etc., in order to decide how to integrate it to our tools.
I mean, that is always the challenge, I would suppose, from development. You've told me it's like basically anything's possible. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty much accurate. Anything is possible provided you have the right people, know-how, and kind of tech to pull it off, and time, of course, as well.
Well, we have you, so we know we have the right people.
Well, we'll figure that out. We figure that out post. But the main thing is when you say design principles or principles of animation or photography or cinematography, the thing is that there is a balancing act to a certain degree, and this happens mostly with PM, of how much we want to kind of guide people along and how much we should get out of the way. Because sometimes it's really easy to think that you're going to improve a workflow or make something like faster or more intuitive, but actually you're getting in the way of the visualization expert or even just the architect that's trying to get by himself to get the result that they want. And so that's kind of the first principle, like don't stand in the way of them trying to do their thing. Like provide enough flexibility and enough options in a way to do this. And then we try to streamline what we see as kind of repetitive tasks, because if it's repetitive, mindless thing you're going to do over and over again, that's what machines are for. That's not what.
Yeah, if you think of you were mentioning, the idea of these principles, like there's no component of that, I imagine, that's all about how do you do a repetitive task, I would assume.
Yeah.
Most of it's probably about some element of creativity.
Yeah, of course. And I've spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out, how can we reduce a task like a mundane task in terms of some sort of modeling task or whatever it might be in the software. And I start thinking about it in clicks. How many mouse clicks does it take me to do this task? If I can save just 1 click or 2 clicks compared to another type of, another style of workflow for the same task, I mean, it adds up in the end, right? If I need to repeat it for 1,000 times, then I save.
And then you think of something like Goldbeck, where everything scales, right? So maybe 1 or 2 clicks, it's 30 seconds here for you, but all of a sudden amongst you, it's like, okay, now we're talking 3 weeks.
True,
because that's your number of people.
Definitely. So the productivity is very important for the company, and quality versus time. This is the main thing. And I mean, it's been going lately, or for a while, for the company as a vision is to the automation thing, the automation in fabrication, in production, in construction, also in design, and we are heading with this toward visualization. And therefore, reducing the amount of clicks in software, it's very important. So and to do this, sometimes it's not possible. It is possible when using different software, not specifically with the same software. And this is the difference between, let's say, V-Ray and Enscape. So Enscape, it's very handy, very flexible, less clicks per project, let's say, for every employee, if we are doing batch projects and batch visualization. So as many projects that you can produce. And this is very important while maintaining the quality that we want to provide to our clients.
So one of the challenges, I think, with a large firm in the context of education is the idea of you teach principles, but you're also caring about software efficiency, right? And how do you get to that quality render that you need? Are you expecting people, when you hire them and bring them into your firm, to understand the principles of creating a quality render, telling a story through visualization?
Well, I can say for us it's more complicated, specifically in this topic, because we want to boost our work and the time efficiency, but still we want the high quality in work, and therefore it's a task in the company. There's more than 100 locations, so there's a lot of places to do design and visualization in every location, and so we have to maintain a system for visualization. So we separated visualization into 2 categories. One of them is procedural rendering, and this means the rendering that should be done, let's say, on daily basis or in any meeting or for every meeting with the client. And so we separated this part, the procedural rendering, from the final rendering. And in this case, you have 2 groups of people working with visualization. Maybe in the second one, the final visualization, this is the professional part, or the marketing part, and it's very important for the competition, big projects, on all these topics. And the first part, the procedural rendering, this is the daily life of an architect. And in this part, it shouldn't be that professional or high-end. Therefore, we focus on the efficiency in the first part and the quality in the next part.
So it's like Enscape and V-Ray.
Yeah, and this is why Enscape and V-Ray, this was the solution that Chaos provided us.
The peanut butter and jelly, if you will. The thing that I like about this, though, is that when I think about our concept of accelerating creativity, there's actually a place for it in both workflows. The one that you say is procedural, you're always looking at fee, right? And you want to be mindful of that and make sure that these projects are efficient. But then when you think of the high-end workflow, it gets to your point, Nicholas. You don't want to expend your creative energy clicking the mouse to do something repetitive. You want to do it on something artistic. And so there's a need, in fact, for a degree of sort of software efficiency under both workflows. But If I were to take, say, this large firm perspective, which is pretty interesting, does it scale down to a firm like yours, Luis?
Well, I think there's two ways of kind of approaching this. You got the productized or product process-based system, and then creativity on the other end of the spectrum. And they're very different. Somewhere in the middle they meet in terms of efficiency, let's say. But for us, obviously scale is not on the same universe as you guys are. So we're only 7 at the moment in the studio. And the way we approach all these problems, or at least expression, communication, is we're very inefficient, and inefficiency is part of the process because it's a journey of exploration. So the types of work that we have to be creating are very different in terms of audiences, and that's kind of the main thing. That we're a mainly Corona-based studio, and we've dabbled into Vantage a little bit here and there just to kind of see what's there and if there's anything for us at the moment there. But the biggest thing I think that is the most important for us is for the software to kind of stay out of the way of the artist, hence removing the need for settings at the moment. Whenever we get the question, what are your settings, we just say we hit render, and that's it, because we use Corona. It's that simple. But then we're using Corona in ways that probably it wasn't meant to be used. So we used it for like music concerts, for a tour, let's say. So we created music videos and things in the backing for the artists. Rendering stuff out in the traditional way, dropping it into After Effects and doing a whole lot of mind-blowing and
But if inefficiency means, or efficiency means something different here, though, which I like, is that you say you don't want the process to be too efficient, but in fact you want the rendering process itself to be quite efficient, but you want the artistic process, the process of crafting the narrative and the story, to be messy.
Exactly.
So you have to balance these two things.
Because every single project that we work on is specifically tailored to very, very different audiences and very, very different people. Ultimately, and they end up being at the marketing stage or for the marketing level sort of quality of work. But it can be film, it can be compositing stuff into film shot with cinema helicopters, with red cameras and stuff. It can be our own sort of dabblings into VFX work, some car experimentation things that we've been doing lately, films for architecture, short films of different aspect ratios, all across the board. And for us, kind of the most important thing is to obviously remember that it's not just playing around, even though it is play and it is fun. There is a point to it, right? And being as inefficient as possible and being able to have as many happy accidents as well happen during the process, because that's part of the discovery, right? That's how you push the envelope and you kind of go beyond what the established ways of doing things are.
So you mentioned developers, and actually that gets to something I'm curious about from your perspective, Chris. Do developers, from your perspective, do they benefit from, or do they engage, or do they need to be encouraged to engage with customers, or is it always best to have an intermediary between them and customers?
Well, it's...
Because you think about software empathy, so to speak. Sometimes it helps to talk to the user.
We have both kind of scenarios, actually. So specifically at Enscape, there are both kinds of scenarios. So a lot of the requirements and a lot of the things that we need to build and the reason why they need to be built is obviously flowing from PM, because PM has quantitative data. They have looked at the market, they have looked at what the users need and what people have asked for, and they have weighted and prioritized in a way. So it kind of reaches us during that stage when the planning really begins, when instead of just talking about what would be nice to have, you start talking about how to build it. And so at that point, usually the engineering department joins the fray. So for things that are big new features, things that are changes that are on a massive scale, actually having the individual voices would create almost too much noise, because you need somebody to actually massage the data and basically present it in a consolidated way. But for feedback, for things that we actually ship, it's immensely valuable. And still many of us, myself included, are still hanging out in the old Enscape forum that still exists, that will be at some point probably merged, I don't know. But and we see the good and the bad, obviously. I mean, people are not always happy, but when they are happy, then you also get to see the results alongside it. And the results are, the interesting thing is it's not just the pretty pictures, it's you see what people then actually try to build with the tools you've given them. And that's an interesting thing to focus for, because beforehand you have this hypothesis, we're going to build this so people can do that with it. Then you suddenly ship even just a preview version, and then the forum starts coming back with these kind of glam shots of their current projects, and you find out that features that you build a certain way are actually being used in a slightly different way to get a specific outcome. And that's where the individual users are actually super valuable, because in quantitative data, that would just get lost. You would just filter that out. But here, you actually can see it.
And that's one of the things I really like about the work that Narrativ does, Luis, is that you take our software
And we break it.
and you break it. And you not only do you break it, but you share with us the ways that you break it.
Exactly. So we one of the first scenarios I can think of is we did all the marketing campaign for Anima 5. So it was the first time, I think they worked with Prompt before in Spain, but it was the first time for the major launch of a new version of the software. They sort of came to us and kind of said, look, we've been in conversations with them before, working closely with them, because we're, I'd say, power users of Anima, to the point where we literally destroy the software. And then they sometimes try to keep up. And just trying to understand how everything works. But the big thing in that scenario was they had 5 bullet points of features that they wanted to showcase. And one particular scenario there was motion blur, and it was like how the integration of motion blur worked with Corona, and how it's kind of better than it was in the past, because there's some limitations with Corona in terms of how it deals with deforming, for all the nerdy people out there, deforming meshes. Like V-Ray can do motion blur on it, but then for Corona you need to do some further hacks. So they gave us completely free rein on this. And they said, do something with it. So our idea of motion blur at that point was, what happens if we start a scene normally, New York-ish looking backdrop, people start walking and all of a sudden they freeze. But when they freeze, they're motion blurred. So you had to adapt the camera to maintain a freeze frame like if it was a still image. But then, what happens if we move the camera through space and maintain the motion blur? That's something that I've never seen before. And it was awful to try and come up with a solution to even, how does one do this? And for the first time ever, we could see what happened if you move a camera through space. Obviously, this is breaking physics, right? But you move a camera through space, and then you have an object moving in a certain direction. So if you rotate the camera around, from the front, it might not look like it has motion blur, but as you rotate the camera, the points start to stretch. And then you get the ghosting sort of animation on it. And then once we showed the engineers, we showed Albert and Diego, and they were like, how the hell did you do this? And we're like, we don't know, but we managed to do this, and this is how we did it. Like, could this be something that you guys sort of implement into the engine later? And there was, we were trying to do something like this, but we didn't figure it out. So we're like, okay, cool. Here's the information, here's how we did it, here's the sexy video. Go and do something with it now.
Well, I like that. If you have that type of relationship and then you have a particular outcome, you can share it and then see the opportunity. It is. And I think that's one of the challenges for any software company is how do you maintain those relationships as you scale? And I think it points to the importance of both of Chris and Anna, and both of you mentioned our forum as a really good conduit for collecting feedback, and it's something that is...
I mean, yes and no. I actually wish there were an easier way for the individual engineering teams to engage with real customers, because the forums are great, but the people in the forums are power users. They're enthusiasts. Yes. They're people that breathe, eat, and drink visualization, essentially. That's all they do. And so therefore they have very, very specific requirements.
They have power user problems.
Yeah, exactly. They have problems that in their particular situation is exactly what's necessary, and it also poses an interesting engineering problem. And oftentimes it can also be extrapolated to a wider user base, because they might have just discovered something where, well, we're lacking and we can improve it. But back when I was actually actively part of the engineering team and actually coding, I would have loved to go to, let's say, an architectural firm and just see how people use this in the wild. Same as when we built the UX team. This was one of the things we always kind of wanted to do. We did it a couple of times through like shared screen sessions and online calls, but it kind of is not the same thing as going out into an architectural company and seeing things being done in the wild, or going out to like an M&E shop or whatever, basically, and just seeing actual people actually use your software.
The horror.
But there is some. This provides a reality check that a lot of people would like to have, but that's very difficult to establish.
Agreed. I mean, that's why I mentioned the idea of empathy in the context of developers, and I feel like that's one of the most important things, is to have empathy for the user, right? And not to say, well, this is the way it is, and you need to use it this way. And I've firmly felt that no software company should try to mandate a certain workflow upon a firm. Rather, the firm should be able to have the capability of asserting their own workflows, obviously within reason, but it is very tough to say, no, this is the way you're going to do things, where in fact...
Well, in VFX, for example, the way it would work is you have both teams in-house, let's say, unless obviously they're using external sort of software solutions, but art drives technology, technology then inspires and drives art. So you have that sort of junction point. I think that's the kind of I guess the gist of kind of this conversation. It's like empathy for the user, but also for the developers, because it's that very important line of communication in the end, isn't it?
And the end consumer of the visual product.
It's
too.
Again the product management that takes care and makes sure that the development will also be able to empathize with what you guys wanted to be implemented. And speaking about the forum, that was just an example, because we have various channels for basically gathering feedback. We meet with customers, we attend various conferences, trade fairs, etc., where we are able to
there's no shortage of data points, is there? And all of them are components that feed in ultimately to product management.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things I liked about what you talked about, Lewis, is the idea of this blurring, is that you're trying to use visual effects to help tell a compelling story. And I've seen some of the work that your firm has done, and particularly, say, in the AEC space, is actually you really blur the lines between what is, say, communicating an architectural project and what you might see for a movie. In fact, you're selling a project using almost movie-level techniques. And so that comes down to capturing the imagination of that end user. And I'm thinking in the context, say, of Goldbeck, what are the ways in which, when you talked about that, the higher end group that you have, what are some of the tools or techniques or ideas that you use to understand how to capture the imagination of that client? Because one of the things I love about architecture is that you're working with someone who's probably spending more money on something than just about any industry out there. I mean, we are literally talking about billions of dollars on some of these projects. And you have to convince them. And that's a huge amount of money. So the vision that you need to present has to be very compelling.
True, and in this specific topic, you will get back to this base point. You should know your audience. And in our case, you should know your client. And definitely, you might have a client with a budget of 10 million euros for this specific project, and you will have another client for a project for 300 million euros.
But that's just one part of what makes them unique.
True. So now you have two different projects, two different budgets, and two different clients. But you might have the requirements for the client with a smaller project higher, or he has higher expectations regarding his project than the big project.
How do you know what those are?
Yeah, this goes back definitely for the sales engineers managing this topic and referring to architects or the teams regarding the design style, the mood board, the quality of rendering, how to pitch for this project, and definitely also what is the type of this project. It is only in an industrial building, or is it an office building, or is it a school? There's also different type of project. So if I want to analyze this, there's too much criteria in our system regarding how to pitch this project. Definitely visualization is a part of this process, but it's not the main part, because you will have like the cost, the estimation, everything will go there. This is the big load. But I can say that visualization plays a major role in this. So it's not the main part, but it's a major thing, especially when you are being very creative in your design. So you can pitch it through visualization. You cannot only pitch it on papers, or maybe you will need an animation. Maybe you will need the VR that we are now doing with Enscape. And it differs from a client to another and from a project to another. But what we are trying to do is that, like, the main title for the company is Building Excellence. So if we are building excellence and we are doing excellent services for the client, and therefore we are treating a small project with a small budget like a big project.
Everyone
with a
gets
big
the same
project.
treatment.
Every project will get a perfect treatment regarding services and visualization.
For who they are.
Yes, because we are aiming to maintain a quality and a brand name for us in the market.
So let's take this back to the education side, because this maybe isn't something that's really thought about, is how do you really understand the end consumer of the content that, say, a visual artist is generating? You know, is this, because you mentioned the idea of almost like a data sheet. You have a dossier on the client. It's like, well, they care about quality. They've used VR. They really like it. You know, they're very budget conscious. I don't know. There's probably a whole list of criteria that you have. Is that something that students get to practice with?
I mean, they do, but it kind of comes in through sort of like the back door. It sneaks in there in terms of the lessons on a total, or in terms of all of our courses and the things that we do. It's because there's so much, right? I mean, if it was up to me, a course could be like 10 years long before you're even done or even scratched on the surface, because there's just so much. And I really try and focus on giving students as many tools as possible and just enough knowledge to be able to explore on their own afterwards. So I'm not going to sit there and tell you how to do every single type of project. I'm going to teach you, back again to what I said earlier, the foundational skills, so that you have the skills and your knowledge yourself to explore even further. So that we can make a valuable course in a more efficient amount of time for the student and not cost a billion to attend to as well, because, you know, the longer the courses, the more expensive they will eventually become, right? So figuring out what is the quote unquote bare minimum of what they should do, and what is the more important bits rather than the lesser important parts that they should know. And that comes through talking with clients, talking with people who would be the ones hiring these students eventually. So talking to Lewis and talking to Ziad. So
there's actually, that's part of the curriculum, is actually engaging with.
Yeah, and it's not just part of the curriculum for the student itself and introducing them to networking in general, but it's also a big part of my job, as to keep tabs on what is Lewis doing and why is Lewis doing what he's doing. Nobody really knows that. But I try and interpret it and understand that, but also try and keep with people with like Ziad and figuring out how to, you know, what do you want with a new person, a new employee, on a larger scale as well as the small scale, as well as just other businesses within visualization. And visualization is a very wide, broad term, right? It's not just for us, it's not just ArcViz even. It's also for product visualization in automotive industries or medical, which is huge on its own, right? I kind of try and get them to a certain level where they could go either way, regardless of what they're interested in, and make it as appealing as possible for the end user and the student in this case, which then needs to be appealing to their future employer.
Absolutely. And when you think about your work, Luis, I mean, a lot of it is absolutely about creating content that is compelling, and it's responsive to the particular need of a project. So do you have a research phase that you typically engage?
Absolutely. So very much the same as you guys in terms of quality of work needs to be the best across the board, because at the end of the day, this is the calling card, let's say, of the studio, or the body of work that we do. But how we get there is maybe similar, but the way we do it is we go through a very sort of thorough discovery session. So before we do any clicks or do anything, once the client is on board, we talk a lot with them. And then we have a lot of questions. We listen mainly at the beginning just to be educated, because the best place that we want to be, and this is something that is very variable depending on people. People tend to be wanting to be the expert, but we kind of find in our own ethos that if we're experts, then we tend to give more derivative, prescriptive solutions. Whereas if they come to us, they would be more looking for a very tailored, specific solution, right? So we become experts through the process with them. So hopefully by the end of the process, we would know exactly the same as them, or even a bit more on some tangents, and even turn the tables back on them and make themselves ask questions that they didn't even know before.
So they're intimately involved with that early design process.
Absolutely. Like we love, the thing that we love the most, because we're people-centric outwards and inwards as well, and customer service is number one, is paramount. Every single discussion we have with them, every single one, always, and this is an unwritten rule, but there should be always moments of like silliness and laughs during a call, and kind of everyone sort of disarming themselves. You know, someone's wearing some headphones funny, and you kind of, because you already build that rapport with them, you kind of point it out, and then people laugh, and then you kind of, you know, you engage in a more human-centric way, let's say, rather than going straight to business.
So your mention of storyboarding and some other workflows makes me think about sort of more manual processes. You know, we think about a lot of what's happening here. It's taking digital tools to do maybe at a much higher level, but to replicate other types of workflows that may have been out there earlier, say, you know, traditional film, drawing, painting, things like that. I'm curious from your perspective in the context of, say, something like Goldbeck, you know, is there still a place for those types of manual workflows, you know, actual physical model, for instance?
Well, definitely the traditional way of treating an architectural project, it's still there. And sometimes it's very important for traditional clients. And in most cases, in the early phases or the preliminary design phase in the process. So we still do a lot of models, physical models, attached to basic visualization, sometimes advanced visualization. It depends on the client.
So it's actually a multimedia experience.
True,
then.
and you can combine it with VR. It depends also on the client. But the point is that we will try to do everything to make it easier for the client to understand or to have a better understanding for his project. Maybe some client will find the drawings enough. Maybe they have a prior experience in this process, and maybe not. But in all cases, we feel always ready to provide everything for the client with the traditional and the high-tech ways of treating this. But also, in our processes, as mentioned before, that Goldbeck has a big BIM department that do not only development, but they do innovation in the process. And let's say we are relying on Chaos regarding visualization software, but at the end side. But at the beginning, like we are working on Revit, we try to innovate in our process to make our work through Enscape faster. And this is a luxury to be able to do it in a big company. So like with materials, with any 3D models that we are using, architectural families, everything related to our 3D model, we innovate in it through Revit with plugins, our own plugins, and it's definitely related at the end to Enscape. And this was really powerful, and at the same time, any decision from Enscape in that case, after we spent a lot of time innovating from our side, any big decision from Enscape to change something will affect our processes because we spend a lot of time doing there. And so far, everything was all cumulative on the good side in our work. all the changes, updates, and everything.
And that's
was-
the ideal, right? Is you don't want to have to advance to a certain point and then walk back the design.
True,
That's
exactly.
that's sort of the disaster.
We are keep pushing forward with the software, and we are doing great in it.
I like this idea, though, of combining something that's physical, like the model or something like that, and some sort of a digital communication to improve overall comprehension. I'm curious from an educational perspective, Nicholas, do you have opportunities or do you see a benefit for students having exposure to, say, perhaps two different types of curriculum? You know, maybe one that includes a single project that includes both pure digital outputs combined with something that might be a physical.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things as well that people tend to forget when they think about visualization, especially the younger generations, which might look into 3D and what's interesting to do in 3D, and they don't know which area to explore yet. VFX and games tends to win kind of. Yeah, there's some sex appeal there, right? I mean, there's an IMDb profile on how many movies you've been doing or whatever, right? Whereas ArcViz doesn't really have an IMDb site, right? So there's not that rock star appeal or creditation in the same way. However, you could go downtown and point at a giant building and said, I help that become a thing.
That is one of the enormously satisfying aspects of architecture.
And that's actually one of the more overlooked parts of it as well, right? Having been part of anything, and not even if, it don't even have to be in ArcViz, it could be in product visualization, because a lot of it ends up being for marketing, for example. And the first time I saw a huge billboard with one of my renderings on it was a huge success for me personally, and this is a long time ago by now, but that is just one of those feelings that you can look at something physical that you helped create, even though you're a nerd, you're sitting there at the computer all day long, and then all of a sudden it manifests into a physical product or output in some way or form. Doesn't matter if it's a building, if it's a car, or if it's a billboard, or even just a TV commercial maybe, or whatever. It still ends up being something recognizable.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's intrinsic human satisfaction in seeing that.
Yeah,
you know,
for
vision
sure.
manifests itself in reality. Ziad, you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, was that you're basically trying to create a best possible view of your project. You know, you said just the right mood, just the right lighting, but the reality is that's not always going to be the case once the building's actually built. And I'm curious about your thoughts on, well, how do you show a client perhaps what the building will actually look like versus that romanticized view, if you will? And is there a place for both types of visualization?
Well, usually in most cases, if it is not, let's say, a competition, and you have a private client asking about a project or wants to go into this process, so he has a vision. And he has maybe a dream. This is his dream project. He's investing in it. And you start working on the project, you start the design phase, planning everything, and the visualization, it's translating your work to the client. And when you try to do it, to do a realistic visualization, you are trying to translate in the best way what you did and the process that you've been through to the client. And this is very important, and as we mentioned before, it's different from a client to another, and the higher or the best where you can go with the visualization, the better for your work, for your reputation, and for your honesty with the client, especially regarding materials, regarding the surrounding area, let's say, of the project. Where are you landing your project in a bird eye perspective? All of this, we take it into consideration, and we try to make it as much as realistic as possible in its context. And for a lot of clients, it's very also important. So it's not like we can do it and nobody will notice. Most of the clients, they want this real thing. And when we say that we are trying to reach a point to trigger their emotions, we are not like manipulating, because I already said he has a vision, And when you are able to catch his feelings, it means that he can see his vision comes to real in your perspective. And in this case, we did our job.
One of the elements that is actually of great interest to us that isn't necessarily visualization related, but it's sort of a cold dose of reality is around building performance and energy consumption that buildings are essentially responsible for. You know, it's the quote that people say around 40% of global energy consumption is in the context of buildings. And then I think of a firm like Goldbeck, where your firm produces a scale of projects that it's phenomenal. You know, it's massive, right? It's larger than most towns, perhaps larger than some cities when you think of your overall portfolio. And what do you think about the opportunity to combine visualization, as you say, procedural visualization via Enscape with our soon-to-be released building performance module?
Well, I think so far the company has executed more than 10,000 projects in all of Europe.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
This is from the execution side, but from the design process, last year alone, we exceeded 1,500 projects. Now, when it comes to sustainability, it's definitely a challenge, not only for us, but for everyone. But Goldbeck is competing on the highest level regarding this topic, from down to the smallest detail inside the building, to the manufacturing process, to the transportation, to the construction, and to the handover. It
all matters.
It all matters, and especially in Germany, this is a hot topic, and it's a very important topic, and we take it very seriously. So, and in the design process, it's also critical. So, because any change that you will do in your design, it will affect this in terms of the orientation, openings, windows, everything in this environment, it's affected. So, regarding what we saw as a keynote in Enscape, and then next thing which is related to prior calculations, or let's say basic calculations depending on your design, I think this is very efficient, and we are looking forward to test it, to see how it will go, and to see if it does fit. But I think because it's a preliminary thing at the moment, it's going to be great.
Nice. And I'm curious from your perspective, Chris, from development, a tool like this, how do you make sure it really folds into the workflow that is Enscape in the design process? You know, the real-time workflow, the idea of design iteration.
Well, okay, it's a bit of a big one. Well, basically, first of all, we're very lucky that we partnered, as you know, we both were there in Glasgow. We partnered with this company called IES, and that basically provides all of the know-how to actually run these simulations, because we obviously don't have in-house knowledge about like how to calculate whatever parts of the building's orientations, openings, construction materials, load, whatever, how they impact building performance. But they have a very long track record and high reputation in the industry. So we partnered with them, and they provided us with basically a simulation engine that allows to get to all of these numbers, provided that the model fits it. What we added, first of all, to make this even feasible is something that's kind of hard to do, which is to actually extract the room volumes from all of the different building parts that you have, because it is not clear nor evident from just the CAD model what actually constitutes a room, what spaces are like, and how they're connected together. And
that's part of the quality consideration. You mentioned you know, the importance of quality at Goldbeck. Like, you want to show something to your clients that's real.
Definitely.
And you need, I'm assuming, to have that type of data in the analysis to say this is getting closer to real.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be within centimeters. Obviously, we're talking rooms, so it's the scale that is counted as like accurate resolution is doesn't have to be that precise, but it needs to be precise enough so that the volumes actually make sense. And then once we have those, we can basically feed them through the simulation engine and also respond to user changes. So the thing is that as you change your model, as you add openings or extend certain parts of the building, we basically would rerun the simulation in a smart way to keep you, like, to feed these results to you and keep you kind of up to date on how that kind of impacts the efficiency of that building when it comes to energy. Of course, this is going to be like a ballpark number. Like, we're dealing with things like EUI. We're not necessarily giving you like the down to the last third decimal dot.
When you say EUI, you mean energy use intensity?
Yes, exactly. So we're giving you that, and obviously we are also looking at how each room or volume within the building would positively or negatively impact that. If you have a giant glass facade in front of your hotel, and that thing is oriented like badly, then obviously this will be the biggest problem space for you to get the energy efficiency of the building up to a higher standard. And eventually this feeds into certification as well. So the idea is, as you design, you can go into this mode and basically check how your changes really impact the energy footprint of the building, so that you don't run into surprises once the actual energy analysis is run, which is usually done by separate engineers with a separate state of the model, and you maybe can do it 3 times over the course of an entire project. But now you get like a live update all the time, and you can still do these things for certification, but you're then not surprised by the result that's supposed to come back.
So what's really fun about that is the idea here, as you were saying, that the render you have could be viewed as a mechanism to see the results of the analysis. Yes. And it's spatially explicit. You can actually see where problem areas might be. When I think about design process and the design process as being collaborative, what I really like about that is that now you can all of a sudden you can communicate with the client these things, right? You're not showing them a graph, you're not showing them a chart, you're showing them the project that they know, a rendering that they can recognize, and the results in a way that all of a sudden they can be part of this decision-making process around building performance. Exactly, yeah. And it gets this idea then of collaboration, fundamentally speaking. What I like here is that we're taking collaboration in a really big way, sort of a lens that extends beyond just showing something and asking for feedback, right? We're actually communicating, providing mechanisms for communication. And Lewis, you talked about collaboration earlier, and I'm curious from your perspective, when you hear of what we have coming down the pipeline, we talked about collaboration tools, the idea that we can host content in the cloud and provide mechanisms for, say, your user, your client to get in there to mark up content, for you to see that markup, for you guys to walk through immersive environments simultaneously, almost like you could lead them on a virtual tour of, say, something that you've been producing. Do you see those types of tools as sort of advancing your workflows and your collaboration workflows?
I mean, we have a very big project that we've been working on for the last 7 years, which is the Olympia one, once again. And if we would have had those tools earlier on in the process, let's say, we could have done a much more compelling job of actually creating stuff for the marketing suite for them. We created quite a lot of assets for them, but we never found kind of the right tool to do something like this hosted on a website, and then you can actually do the walkthrough, just because of the sheer scale of the project. So having access to some of those tools that would make it a lot easier would open definitely a lot more possibilities for us, and keeping the use of kind of the integration between all the software being from the same family. That's what we find,
right? And we looked at this particular challenge. We all of a sudden realized that, of course, people are using our tools in a collaborative manner, like no surprise. But then we also looked at, well, what is the way in which they're sharing information? And we found that they had this layer cake of different tools that they had to use, sort of online pinboards, if you will, that everyone had to log into and see simultaneously. They might be sending a video file that someone needed to download and view. Maybe they were just doing a screen share during a Zoom meeting or what have you. And all of a sudden we looked at it became this very fractured collaboration workflow. And I think from our perspective, hearing what you're saying is great, that there's actual value in bringing this into sort of integrated visual environment.
As long as it's, well, you know what I mean, it's like the most important thing is it's part of the same family, it speaks to each other, and it's cohesive, and sort of, once again, like I said before, it kind of stays out of the way of the experience and kind of the user, then that's the best case scenario, for sure.
What about students? Like, because the critique, the idea of having these studios where students pin up their work, say, in a lot of visual arts, is like sort of sacrosanct. It's part of the process. Is there a place for this type of digital and collaborative feedback?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a possibility and maybe with a few additional tweaks when we've seen a little bit more of it and what we can actually do with it, and we get a chance to experiment a little bit more, I can definitely see it as a good option for assignments, for example, for a student, so that it's easier to get the students to do an assignment and then actually give critique or feedback based on those assignments, and all the way down to the level of actually being in the 3D space and not just a final rendered image, for example, or an animation or whatever it might be, and actually using more real-time options or whatever options for where, you know, right now we're just using basic screen share of someone having 3ds Max open, for example, and they can go around and show you some things. But if we could simplify some of those features as well, and again, we use a whole different service for uploading images sometimes, and then you have a new system for the, you know, the grades and feedback systems and LMS systems and all of these great crazy things, right? I mean, the more that we can cancel out multiple different software packages and solutions and just keep all as much as possible at one place, that can definitely help with a lot of those, like being more efficient in terms of assignments and group projects, for example, across students as well. Especially being an online school, you have a student in Australia and another student in the US or in Kazakhstan or whatever, right? I mean,
the thing is, we're truly global now, aren't we, when it comes to the design processes.
Having cloud solutions to actually help with those things is definitely a must-have.
When you think about our products, right, one of the components here is about creating an ecosystem, ultimately.
Exactly.
And so when we talk about this idea of collaboration or building performance, it's all about pushing data from one place to another. Are there ways that you think about our data management in the way that, say, you want the user to be able to experience our software to make that as efficient of a process as possible?
Well, yeah. So basically, our current products, or I should say currently established products, such as Enscape or V-Ray, they're both plugins, and this means that they're limited to some extent by the host application they're installed to. We have noticed that we've been basically observing it for quite a while now, and as we announced during the previous Chaos Unboxed, we're working on a new product that will basically be a standalone and will allow our users to tell their design story in the best possible way. It's a tool for storytelling.
When you say standalone too, what does that mean exactly relative to, say, the host application? Like, where does the data reside and how is it transferred around for, say, the design artifact versus?
The data could come either from Enscape or from V-Ray, and it basically feeds that standalone application. By staying standalone, this means that it is not tied or limited to a particular app, such as Revit or SketchUp, whatever.
Nice. And so what are some of the functionalities that come along with that architecture?
Well, we know that our users usually request to be able to create animations with, like, people walking around, cars moving, plants growing out of nothing, you know? So, yeah, this tool will, as I said, help them tell the story in a unique way. Speaking about efficiency, probably I should have started with saying that this new tool, it will be as simple as Enscape. So it basically continues that workflow.
That is nice. So then this isn't necessarily a tool for the visual experts, but it's actually incorporating some of the tools that visual experts are known for, like animation.
Yeah.
So, Luis, when you hear this, do you hear threat or are you not worried?
It's just another tool that we're going to break and find out how it works to its core. So, I mean, we're always happy to test new things and kind of see where we can take it that probably you guys didn't think about before.
From your perspective, Chris, is there a mechanism by which we sort of allow for data to move up and down this sort of quality pyramid or expertise pyramid?
Well, I don't know necessarily about up and down, but I mean, what is already in place in Enscape today, and the sort of bridge between the different products, which was the first kind of compatibility thing that was introduced once we all joined forces, is the current V-Ray scene export. I mean, that was step number one, where you can get your project set up in Enscape exactly the way you want, and then you can export the whole scene and just hand it over to V-Ray for like additional tweaking and processing and making it even more beautiful. Or you just take it out of the box and you just see where you land. But the main benefit is that you can continue working on it. Here, it would basically be the same thing. There are different solutions to this, and we've discussed also different solutions internally, but generally the format actually shouldn't really matter to users because we will provide interoperability between these different tools. The real benefit, though, is the data flow from like the specific tools where the design happens, so from like the CAD and BIM tools towards something that is more visualization centric, because at some point the data on the CAD and BIM side is finished, it's done, because it's been approved, that's what the client wants, that's what's been certified, that's the thing. At that point, there is no need anymore to be tied to this project and to all the data that is not relevant simply for visualization in it, and we can actually hand over something lightweight to different tools in, well, the slew of tools we offer to keep working on it, depending on what workflow you prefer, really. And for those tools, also the limitations don't, as Anna said, don't apply. There are reasons why we currently don't have certain things like specific animations in Enscape, because the focus is on performance and being real-time and being very responsive to changes. The focus isn't necessarily to provide you with the biggest capability for setting up animations in movies in Enscape.
You'll start making compromises in the core software if you bring in those functionalities.
Yeah, exactly. We'll weaken the thing that actually makes the product great by tacking on more and more things that can have a more like fitting home and more specific place where you can find them.
So we can't have a conversation about accelerating creativity without the elephant in the room of AI and what that means. And I would like to start on the education side, because I think about education and I think of one of the challenges of students seeing AI as some mechanism to achieve a particular objective in a course faster.
I mean, it's a bit of a subject, right? Especially for the younger generation, I think has a tendency, and sometimes the older generation as well, have a tendency of maybe being a little bit afraid of AI and what it can and cannot do.
Yeah, I mean, it's like fire, right? You have to have a healthy respect. At least as a software company, we certainly do.
It can still burn you, right? But I personally thoroughly believe that AI can definitely be used as a great tool, as an additional tool in your toolbox of many tools, which can help you achieve whichever goal you kind of want to achieve, right? And adding materials and AI-generated materials through Chaos's new, sorry, I forgot what that was called so far.
I don't know if we have a name
I don't know
for
if
it. I think it's that new. Yeah.
We'll find one. We'll find one. That's fine. But after seeing that and thinking a little bit about it, I think it's going to be an awesome tool, because when you think about it, creating materials in V-Ray, for example, you end up doing a lot of the same steps, the first 5 steps or whatever, to creating this material. Why not just skip some of those things? Why not take some of that away and then leaving the creative freedom afterwards?
This gets back to the number of mouse clicks that we were talking about.
And you're still the artist that coming up with the idea, and you're still the one having the full control to tweak it afterwards. It's not creating, as far as I understand, a finished material with no options to it. Yeah. It's creating basically, as again, correct me if I'm wrong, a V-Ray material with all of the nodes attached for you, and then you can attach even more maps to it yourself and mess around with it and create something completely different from what you actually prompted as well. So it's just giving you a new base to start from. It's more of a preset library, the way I see it, but it's a customizable preset library that you can use as a good base for something, and then if you really need to do something custom on top of it, you're still allowed to do all of those things. You're not limited via maybe the more current known image generators and all of these things through AI, where it's like, well, you give it this text prompt and then you cross your fingers that it's actually giving you something usable.
And if you'd want to change it, either you have to do another prompt or you bring it into Photoshop.
Yeah, it's a new prompt and then you start all over again, right? Whereas here, it can create a base for you, which might have been a little bit wrong or it might be a little bit off, but now you can just tweak the last few things, the colors, the values, whatever you kind of want to in a material. And that, I think that's a different way of thinking about it, and I don't see it as it's not challenging anyone's job. If anything, it's just making them more efficient.
But is it bold enough? And that's, I think, we're taking a gamble as a software company with that approach.
I agree.
Can I piggyback off? Okay, just briefly, because the AI question comes up so often and it's so ubiquitous that I by now have, I think, formulated for myself at least a response that I just would like to plug here, which is it's best to place it at the beginning or at the end of the cycle. Like the baseline is a perfect example. Like the starting point, the empty canvas problem can be solved with a prompt. The stuff that you need to set up to have like a rough sketch of what you want, that's a great application for it. At the same time, there is a great application for it to fine-tune things that you need hours to get the sliders to the right position, but you can describe accurately to another human being what kind of like mood, for instance, you want to have. I want a specific color balance or whatever, but I cannot put it in there because the sliders keep fighting me. At the beginning or at the end, it's like a really useful tool, but it's never going to replace like the whole process. And so either it helps you get started or it helps you get done, but it cannot replace the entire work of either visualization specialists, architects, or like any creative types, in my opinion, because the result always would be derivative. That's the problem. You never get something new out of it.
Which is, of course, the thing is that not everyone is operating at the tip of the design spear, so to speak, right? So there may be plenty of people where the prompt is sufficient.
But I think regarding architectural work, so not only AI in visuals, if you relate AI to architectural work, at the preliminary design phase where you create a mood board, for example, for your client, it's a very efficient tool now, the available AI, which is the text for image, for example, text to image. So you can generate some really cool stuff and use them as a reference or as examples and show the client the way or your direction where you are heading with his project. And definitely in this phase, you didn't already create a visualization. It's a preliminary design. So AI in this case is efficient. But where I see AI in the visualization or the architectural visualization is when I will be able to control a lot of parameters in my AI tool. This is where it will be beneficial, and it's the same idea as yours, that it will create a base for me, and then I can edit some stuff regarding this and that, this topic, materials, realism, style, I don't know, other stuff. And I think the first step that Chaos is doing right now with implementing AI in a specific manner inside the software. So the AI in Chaos, it's not a software. It's in a specific item inside Chaos' software, which is like now generating a material from a text. This is an efficient way. I think it's a great first step, and I can see a lot of potential in it.
So when I think of narrative, when you were mentioning, you use it at the beginning or the end, you're using it, I know for sure, at the end.
Yeah. So the way we've been using it, at least, is, and for many years now, because it's like the buzzword AI right now is just a hot sort of sexy terminology.
Well, we want the clicks, so and SEO here, so we got to say it.
No, exactly. But it's like at the end of the day, these are machine learning algorithms, right? And we've been using them in one way or another in traditional software for many years. You've been using it, for example, in After Effects with the new rotoscope, not the newest version when it came out, for rotoscoping people or removing backgrounds, Photoshop, generative fill, and ways we use it at the beginning, not necessarily in the middle, because as you said, that's where you actually do the work, and then at the end to kind of finish it off. But examples of how we use it or how we've used it is storyboarding, so generative imagers, upscalers, so essentially take a sequence of a film, render out half of the frames, interpolate them, render them at 1/4 of the resolution, upscale them to 4K, changing people's faces. I trained in the time that I sort of came up in the industry as, started in, everything was Photoshop based. Now, why am I going to do that? It's a waste of time. Oh my God, just taking a generative image, throwing it into one of these video animating things, and then just generate landscapes, kind of incorporate it there, up-resing textures. There's possibilities.
It is a huge part of your workflow. Then it sounds like
tremendous, of course, because at the end of the day, the way we see it and the way maybe later on we can have a different conversation 5 years into the future, but right now it is an incredible tool to be used and to empower and to accelerate and to actually liberate your creativity, because a lot of the constraints that we had before are no longer there. So what's the excuse?
But there sounds like you're really experimenting too, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's no roadmap for how to use these tools right now.
No, we're using in everything, and it's so exciting, at least for us.
And it's important to add that it's giving you more time to the important bits. On
creativity.
The creative parts. Yeah. So it's not taking away anyone's jobs. It's just moving a little bit the barrier of what that job might consist of, so that you can focus on more important bits, right? So I don't see that many, because there's a lot of people who are afraid that, concept artists are gonna lose all their jobs because of AI and generative tools. And a lot of you people, both of you are talking about using generative AI to create your initial mood boards or whatever. Yeah. But that's just a new reference point from the concept artist or a concept artist to work from, and then make it more specific into whatever you're feeling like. Where before, we were using Google image search and doing the exact same thing.
Cutting images out of magazines.
It's just a more complex version of that. So it's not really that different, but it's a little bit more specific, because we can now specify it more through a text prompt, and then you can have an artist on top of it.
And for example, if copyright is a thing that everyone is really stressed about, then there's actually incredible solutions coming out through copyright holders.
Yeah.
So you got Getty Images AI and stuff like that. They can generate things, and if you want to do it at that stage of the process.
And I think it will also affect, so as you said, it will not replace jobs, but it will affect productivity and expectations. So if you can, let's say, produce or you can finish one project in 1 week. Now with AI, the expectation will be, or maybe in the future, you should every day produce one project. And it happened 30 years ago and 60 years ago with other innovations. The engineers used to draw all the projects on papers. The expectation was to produce one project per 6 months, for example. Now the expectation from an engineer to produce one project per 2 weeks. With those tools, it's pushing forward. It is removing a lot of the stress and the repeated stuff. But let's see how it will go.
One of the things where the human touch, at least for now, cannot ever be removed from is curation. And taste and experience, and actually deciding on what is the thing that is the correct thing. Because generative AI, let's say, right now, is creating things from a pool. Yes. And what happens with that is, and you can just go on LinkedIn, and you'll get the perfect sort of test bed for that. Everything looks the same, because it's all generated from the exact same thing. So you can literally just generate something, throw it into Photoshop, enhance it, throw it into a 3D modeling software.
There's also that element of human judgment. If you look at other types of algorithms of curation, say like one's playlist that may be recommended by an online streaming service, yes, maybe it's the right genre, but it oftentimes is not the right song. So that's where I think that maybe the flaws, the nuance, the unexpected outcomes of the human touch is, I think, was what is so exciting. And that's what's great, is that we're not in a position here with all of these tools that we want to create, replacing that. We're going to really just accentuate it.
And this will go back, I think, to the parameters thing that we spoke about it. When I will have a lot of parameters inside this AI to manipulate, we can maintain this touch of humans. And it started from, let's say, text to image, and then they added text to image, but with a reference image. But it would be great when it will reach that AI is communicating with my 3D model, and I'm manipulating AI on different levels. Therefore, it will be like the best scenario.
Yeah, replacing the clicks.
And this kind of stuff has happened before. We just tend to forget it. It's like there's something called computer animation, rather than traditional animation. There's ray tracing in render engines rather than rasterization, as before. There's I had another example, but you get the point. So it's just embrace the technology and then let's just
Adapt.
exactly, and
Well, not adapting isn't much of a choice, is it? Yeah. It's going to happen regardless. All right, well, thank you, everyone here, for joining what was a lively, insightful, challenging panel. I think you really put our products in the hot seat. It was an opportunity to see how you push them in ways that really go beyond anything that we necessarily intend during the product development process. I think that's what's so exciting about speaking directly with our users. As we go on this journey to accelerate creativity, bring in new capabilities, I'm looking forward to seeing what you end up breaking, as Luis would say, and also how you're able to create fantastic designs that really accelerate your creativity. For those of you that are following the Unboxed series, we really appreciate you joining us on this journey, exploring creativity and innovation at Chaos.